the pivot workbook, and that's all based on these assumptions that we have when we are starting our businesses. So one of those ideas is making sure that you know what people are talking about so that you can be a part of what Dan Kennedy refers to as the conversation already going on in their head. So just kind of stay on track because I know I can wander off. I'm just gonna go in order. I did leave myself a couple of notes on where to skip chapters, and like there's one where I leave a note on page 37 to go to page 379 just because the content and the material is so well connected. But this quote right here on page 25, not sure if you can see it, so I'll read it out to you. If you are smaller or less famous than whoever you want to aspire to, but if you're smaller and less famous but have an interesting story to tell, you need to tell that story yourself. The media, yes, their job is to cover news and to bring and share information. If they don't know you, then they can't tell your story. So in this information age, in the gig economy, everybody's sharing everything. You have to tell your own story. And I know I've struggled with that. I've talked about being visible and the struggle with being visible. And I see, hey, Miss Mabry, and I see how that detracts from who I can help and how I can serve. So you need to tell your own story. There are blogs that let you do that. Instagram lets you do that. LinkedIn lets you do that. Facebook lets you do that. And those are all platforms, a part of this new age, part of the new rules of marketing and PR. So Miriam Scott goes on to say, fortunately, the web is a terrific place for you to do that. And again, I'm just flipping through. So I'm going to go to, this takes me to that note where it says go to page 379. So I'll start kind of reading what I highlighted here. This is on page 37. It's the section name is the same as the title, which is the new rules of marketing and PR. But he says you are what you publish. And this isn't necessarily saying that you need to go work with Shanley McRae of Opportune Publishing or Pretty Printing Co. out of Atlanta to publish a book. This just says you have to develop and publish your own content. So your Instagram lives, your Instagram stories, your Facebook lives, that's content, but you got to publish it. The other aspect of that is making sure that you're publishing the kind of content that relates to who you want to be known as or what you want to be known for. So just making sure that the content matches the brand. Yes, there are opportunities where you need to show your personality, but if that doesn't even support who you are, what you're doing, what kind of business you have, and what kind of problems you solve, then it's not lending itself to developing you or positioning you as that expert. So this again is this concept of newsjacking. So let's see. One sentence I have here that I have a star by, instead of causing one-way interruption, which is again the old way of marketing, marketing is about delivering content at just the precise moment that your audience needs it. So what that means from a newsjacking perspective, if I can find it. Okay, so if you think about it, if you've never heard the term newsjacking, and I'm going to go ahead and scroll to the page that it's on in the Pivot Workbook. It sounds like hijacking, right? Which is pretty similar. So what you're essentially doing is hijacking a news story. And a couple of the examples that he gives in the 5th edition, and that's what I'm flipping through. I also have the 3rd or 4th edition somewhere. But one of the examples that he gives one of the examples that he gives about newsjacking is during the whole Deflategate situation. So, Tom Brady, however you feel about how that played out, the hashtag Deflategate was starting to circulate. So Krispy Kreme, and just to give you some context, the Patriots are sponsored by Dunkin' Donuts, or at least they were at the time of this writing. Krispy Kreme posted something, I think, on Twitter that says, "Ours are fully filled. Hashtag Deflategate." So what was happening was they were building, or literally like hanging themselves onto the coattails of what was happening with this hashtag Deflategate. And of course, we know Krispy Kreme and Dunkin' Donuts are maybe not arch rivals, but they are competitors. But that was a way that they were able to, Krispy Kreme was able to leverage what was happening in the broader communication space about Deflategate, and they were able to kind of ride that wave. So I'm going to see if I can, I'll probably tear something up, but if you can see this image, let me turn this light off. So this image actually is from the Pivot Workbook. This is one of the assumptions that I use, and that's me on camera. So this is the arc or the life cycle of a news story, and this is how you basically newsjack. Now the thing is, you have to make sure that you're staying in tune with what's happening, which of course means that you have to be staying in tune with what's happening, but that means you may have to change what you're consuming. That means that you can't just be watching Real Housewives kind of thing, right? So here we go. Breaking news here, right? And what you'll want to do with this is you can set up a Google alert that basically tells Google whenever something happens or whenever a news post comes out about this particular subject, whatever my subject area is, I want I want an alert or notification to my email. So you have breaking news here, and Merriman Scott suggests that you here, because what's going to happen is they're going to start people, which is my bartending business. We have been interviewed by a radio station in New York because, well, for Cinco de Mayo, for National Tequila Day, because they were preparing for those particular holidays. Now, newsjacking is your responsibility as a marketer. It's not, the journalist is not going to come looking for you unless you're showing up and how they get their information. So I just wanted to share that. Let me figure out how to put this back without tearing up the club. All right, so that's what newsjacking is. So I'll keep reading through that cycle. You have breaking news, then the journalists are going to start looking for their information, their additional information. So if you newsjack, you issue a press release, and he actually gives some tips on how to newsjack. So you get your take on the news into the marketplace of ideas, and how you can do that is you can blog about it, you can post it to your online media room, which you'll want to have one on your website. You can send a real-time media alert, which means you need to know who the media are that are typically writing about this particular subject. And he also goes on to say how harness the power of the podium. Live stream it, so you can hop on IG Live or Facebook Live as this stuff is happening, and you'll start to show up in the search results when the journalists are taking their more traditional routes. Other ways, you can post it on Google+, comment on breaking news stories from online publications. So CNN, MSNBC, Huffington Post is really about community engagement, as you can see more and more. Also says use media tip lines, tweet to appropriate reporters, and of course other media personnel. Oh, there's the graph in the book as well. And some other ways are to just monitor those keywords, which is like doing that Google alert, and then tracking people you know. So that's actually one of the highlights of the new rules of marketing and PR is newsjacking. And that means that, you know, you got to be ready for the spotlight. It means that you need to stand in and own who you are, what you're good at, because that's the part of where we really struggle, is we just don't want to take ownership for what we're good at. Taylor St. Clair, you too. But let's see what else. So we went to page 379, and again, that was from page 37, taking us to page 379, and that was towards the back of the book. So let's see what else we got going on. So Miriam Scott also advises that you think like a publisher, and one of the ways to do that is to consider the following questions. Who are your readers? Or in your case, as a business provider, service provider, who are your customers? How do you reach them? What are their motivations? What are their problems? How can you help solve those problems? And how can you entertain and inform them at the same time? So one of the number one rules of marketing is to not be boring. And you have to, you want to serve them, you want to inform them, but you also have to entertain people. You know, we have really short attention spans. There are a lot of distractions. So there are a lot of things that you're competing with that you need to make sure that you can address and apply. Last couple of questions from this section, and his advice to think like a publisher is to think about what content will compel them to purchase, because the end goal is to grow your business, right? It's to bring revenue into the business. It's not about likes. It's not about, those things are good, but those things don't keep the lights on, as we well know. This next section, it says know the goals and let content drive action. So what that means is, especially for people who have been exposed to marketing in the more traditional sense, is the goal of the marketing department is not to get more press releases issued. The goal of the marketing department is not to get more media appearances, unless you can directly track those appearances to sales. We know that the goal of every department in any organization is to grow the business, is to bring money in. So make sure that everyone is clear about those goals, even if that means you have a virtual assistant. I know Business Support Bestie was on, and when I tell you, she saved my life a couple of months ago, so I'm looking forward to working with her again. But the beauty of that, the beauty of having a virtual assistant that understands the goal is to grow the business, is not that she isn't just doing any old task to help free up my time. She's actually duplicating my efforts to scale and grow the business. So the book title is The New Rules of Marketing and PR. This is the 5th edition. So this one covers how to use social media, online video, mobile apps, blogs, and news releases. News releases and viral marketers. There's like, I read the 3rd edition, 2nd or 3rd edition, I think, and of course it didn't have that information in it. So that's the title item. And you're welcome, Danae. All right, so let's see. Like I said, there's so much in here. I'm only doing part 1. And this I have a couple more tags, but we can end on this note about buyer personas. So you'll hear this in different names. So it'll be buyer personas, avatar, ideal customer, which is different from your target audience. Just make sure you know that difference. I refer to it as the perfect prospect. And that's another worksheet that or exercise that I actually have from the Pivot workbook, which I'm pulling up on the screen. So if you shoot me an email, meetprofessorwhite, PROFWhite@gmail, I'll of course send you the links to the recording of my screen so that you can see what I'm referring to. But the perfect prospect profile, I actually did a 30-minute interview with someone specifically about this concept. And it's the same thing as Miriam Scott's buyer persona. And that just means you know who your customers are. You know who they are as an individual. You know what motivates them. You know what they're frustrated by. You know where they're spending their free time, because all of that impacts how they make their buying decisions, which is going to impact how you make your marketing or how you deploy your marketing strategy. So let me just give you a couple of highlights from the workbook, the Pivot workbook. So we always start with value, and that's always about making sure that you can articulate what problem you are solving or your company solves for the customers in general. Now, bear in mind that you'll have more than one type of customer. So ideally, you would want to do this exercise for each of those different customer segments. But just as a 10,000-foot view, you'll start with value and you'll think about who your broad audience of customers is. Then we kind of delve into who the perfect prospect is individually. Like, we give them a name, and they actually might be a real person or a mashup or a composite of several real people that you know, but this person needs a name because you're breathing life into who they are as your customer, which means you're breathing life into, literally breathing life into your business, because all we see is all there is. So if you don't see who your customers are, if you don't see how that's going to impact your bottom line, then that might not manifest itself. So give the person a name. You need to know how old they are and not a range, because yeah, I might fall between the ages of 35 and 44. That's not my age. So you need to give the person a specific age range, because again, this impacts who they are in life, what they're doing, what kind of discretionary income they may have in general terms. Where does he or she work or go to school? They spend in their free time, which is different from where they're volunteering, because I might be volunteering with the sorority, but outside of that, I'm spending my free time taking, Sparrow to ballet or, whatever she's got me running around doing these days. So what is your perfect prospect motivated by? But more importantly, what are they frustrated by? Tony Robbins, in one of his numerous talks, basically said, business support, Bessie, you said, what are some tips to figure that out? Are you referring to the aspects of the perfect prospect? So let me know which part specifically you're talking about, okay? So more importantly, what are they frustrated by? As I was saying, Tony Robbins basically says people only they mainly buy to reduce any pain they're experiencing, and they rarely buy to amplify any pleasure that they have. So so Taylor St. Clair, ditto, what are some tips to figure which part out? I talk a mile a minute. So, figure out who's your ideal client. Well, because you've been in business, and this is a little bit different for people like Queen Lady Iva, because you've been in business, you think about the clients that you've had that you loved working with, right? And then of course you have those clients that they paid you and that was good, but in the end you really had to think about, do I want to work with that kind of client again? So by process of elimination, we know that that client isn't your ideal client. What we'll focus on are those that you have already worked with, that enliven you, that you can't wait to work with again, and then you start kind of digging into who they are. So like I said, it could be a composite. Some of it is stuff that you're making up. So there isn't a right or wrong answer, but some answers just make more sense than another. So for me, right, and let's take, if I were your ideal client, I have a toddler, so I'm probably not spending a whole lot of my time on the nightclub scene, right? But that also means I'm not doing a lot of PTA stuff. So you would be looking at what are the places that the mom of a toddler, or what are the things that a toddler would spend their time doing? That childcare or daycare, that might be swim lessons. So you're looking at community centers now. That's probably those kind of, I don't know if they have them where you are, but you can take your child, you can like drop your child off for like a half a day, sometimes at churches. Those are things, like those are places where I might be spending my free time, but not necessarily volunteering. So I saw that you said that makes sense. So we can definitely, keep talking about it. Now, for those of you who haven't gone into business yet, this part is going to be a bit of a challenge, but it's still just a composite. You're still just thinking about who are the types of people or agencies, Queen Lady Iva, that are ideal for you. And then even in that case, who's the decision maker at that agency? Because the organization itself is not going to write you a check. There's going to be someone within that organization that you convince that you can serve their audience or their community, and that is the person that's going to write you the check. So you will need to develop your perfect prospect from that perspective. Like, who is she or who is he? What's important to him, and what boards might they be sitting on, especially from a nonprofit standpoint. So I'm definitely kind of getting a little bit away from the new rules of marketing and PR, delving more deeply into what I found in developing the Becoming Fearless model, but it sounds like it's helpful. So I will read a little bit, I'll read through it a little bit more, but I also shared a link to the interview that I had with Radio Red. I think she's in New York, relocating to South Carolina, somewhere. She's all over the place. But we go into more detail about this perfect prospect profile in that interview. So when I assign this to my students, most of the exercises that they have are worth 5 points, 2.5 points. This is only one of 2 assignments that are worth a full letter grade because it's so important. And that's because I think this is the second assignment they get in the semester. Out of the next 10 assignments, each and every next assignment is related back to this perfect prospect. And I mean, we go from developing our pricing structure to testing the business to developing an editorial calendar to researching our competitors, all based on this perfect prospect profile. So that's how influential and important that it is in building your business. Much appreciated. You're welcome. All right. So where do they work or go to school? What are they motivated by? More importantly, what are they frustrated by? Which means in your messaging, you would talk more about the problem that you help solve and not necessarily the product or service that delivers that solution, if that makes sense. You can ask more questions to help me make that more clear for you. But the main thing is nobody cares about what we're selling. What they care about is the fact that you're going to make my life better, or that you're going to improve my quality of life. You're going to make me more sane, help me get more organized. I don't care what you're selling me to do it. Can you promise me that you're actually going to do it? And that's the main thing about the making sure that you're focusing on the solution. So you said, so you give the result. I guess you could say that you would focus on the outcome or the transformation, which is a really big buzzword as you'll start reading more about different things and looking at different resources as you're growing your business. You'll start to see more and more of what are called heart-centered entrepreneurs talk about transformation. And in this case, the result should be a transformation. They should be going from unhealthy to fit. They should be going from confused to having clarity. So that's the transformation, which is, of course, the result. Right, but not necessarily how you're going to do it, because that's your secret sauce. That's your blue ocean strategy. There are some people who are going to want to know what strategies you use, and you can still use high level language with that, but not necessarily, okay, in the Becoming Fearless model, in the foundation module, we actually talk about the golden circle, the perfect prospect profile, this, that, and the third, because they don't even understand those things. Most of that is language that you and your team understand. So even if you told them how, it might just confuse them more, right? And there's this saying that goes, the confused mind says no. So if you share too much information, you're overwhelming them with information. Then they get confused and then they just automatically shut down. Like, how many times have we been in that situation where it's too much and you just shut down? So you think about the fact that your customers might be doing the same thing if you're giving them too much information. So I'm going to wrap this part up because I know everybody has other things to do, but I have to share. And again, make sure you send me an email so that you can get the link to the screen share. So this last part, which connects us back to the new rules of marketing and PR is where does first, who is your prospect most influenced by? What people, brands, or organizations are your prospect influenced by? So yes, it might be Oprah or it might be Beyonce. You think about, hey Joseph, you think about for Taylor St. Clair in the fashion industry, and it might not be runway, but there is some style icon like you have in your intake questionnaire. Everybody has a style icon. That's who influences them. Now, the follow-up question to that is, where do they follow those influencers? Because while we know there's Pinterest, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, LinkedIn, and the list goes on, your customer is probably spending the majority of their time following and engaging with that influencer on 2, maybe 3 social media platforms. And that's the place where you want to go. There is a section in here, it was so funny. The title says, let me see it. Oh, it says you can't go to every party, so why even try? And this is a section on social networking as marketing. Social networking as marketing. You can't go to every homecoming party. You can't go to every day party during Essence Fest, so why even try? And this is the same thing for social media. Unless you absolutely have no other distractions for about 40 to 60 hours a week, there's no way. I mean, yeah, you can use Hootsuite and Buffer and those kinds of things, but sometimes you lose your authentic voice in that. But there's no way that you can be on Twitter, Pinterest, Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, LinkedIn, and the list goes on, and truly making an impact with your customers. Jack of all trades and master of none. Absolutely. I have so many students that say, oh, I want to be a jack of all trades. And I just sit there like, okay, and just carry on. But when we think about who your prospects are influenced by, and then thinking further about where those influencers have the most influence, because we know some people just spend more time on Twitter. Their Twitter following is huge, or their Instagram following is huge, but not their Facebook engagement. That's where you need to be. Wherever your customers are is where you need to be, which means you don't have to be everywhere. So your customer typically gets their news and information from, I want you to think about these things. What newspaper, it can be print, I know they're dying, but they're still around, or online newspaper, what magazine, what news station, and what radio station do they get their news and information. So of course, with the internet, everything is so commoditized and everybody has access to everything. But remember, we're talking about one person. We're talking about one customer who has a name and who is of a specific age. The name of the book, Joseph, is The New Rules of Marketing and PR. And I'm also recording my screen. I pulled up a couple of workbooks or a couple of work sections from the Pivot workbook, and I'm reading some of the sections on how to create your perfect prospect profile. You're welcome. So again, if you didn't write that down the first time, you need to think about where your customer gets their, or what newspaper are they reading, what magazine, what news station, so that might be local news, or it could be, your CNNs and things of that nature, and what radio. Because this